Section 10.4, Multiplying Real Numbers. What is 5 times a negative 2? Well, many people tell me that 5 times a negative 2 is equal to a negative 10, and they would be correct. But let's talk about why 5 times negative 2 has to equal negative 10. We're going to do that by looking at some patterns, and really that is all math is a bunch of patterns. So you know that 5 times 4 is equal to 20. 5 times 3 is equal to 15. 5 times 2 is equal to 10. 5 times 1 is equal to 5. And 5 times 0 is equal to 0. I want you to take a look at that pattern and tell me, what is it in that pattern that's the same? Well, as you're looking at it, you probably notice that in every single one of those multiplication problems, the first number is the same. It's always 5. The second number is being reduced by 1, from 4 to 3 to 2, etc. And when we do that, the answer is also reduced. It's reduced by 5 every single time. 20 subtract 5 gives me my 15. 15 subtract 5 gives me my 10. 10 subtract 5 gives me my 5, and so forth. So in order for the pattern to continue, I would do exactly the same thing. I'm going to have 5 multiplied, but this time it's going to be a negative 1. When I do that, I'm going to have to reduce the 0 by 5, which gives me a negative 5. 5 times a negative 1 has to equal negative 5. If I continue then, 5 times a negative 2, I have to reduce that negative 5 by 5 more, and I would get an answer of negative 10. So I multiplied a positive number, 5, multiplied, I'm going to put a dot here for multiplied by a negative number, and I got a negative answer. And that is one idea that you need to keep in mind in this particular section. A positive number times a negative number will give you a negative answer. Let's use that idea to take a look at another series of numbers that I have here. Negative 4 times 3. I have a negative times a positive, so I know the answer to that has to be a negative. It would have to be a negative 12. Negative 4 times 2, same thing, I would get a negative 8. Negative 4 times 1 would have to give me a negative 4, and negative 4 times 0 would have to give me 0. Well, let's take a look at this pattern. Once again, the very first number always stays the same. It's a negative 4. The second number in each one of those multiplication problems, I am reducing by 1 every time. 3, 2, 1, 0. And notice what is happening to the answer. This time, what's happening to the answer is I'm actually adding 4. Negative 12 plus 4 gives me a negative 8. Negative 8 plus 4 gives me a negative 4. Negative 4 plus 4 gives me 0. So I would have to add 4 to 0, and I would get an answer of 4. So you can see in this case, I have a negative multiplied by a negative, and I get an answer of a positive number, which is the second rule that you need to keep in mind. Multiplying two negatives together gives you a positive answer. Another way that some people take a look at this when multiplying two numbers. Some people say, well, if the signs are the same, they're both positive or they're both negative, then you are going to get a positive answer. If the signs are different, then you are going to get a negative answer. And those two rules work when you are multiplying two numbers together. Here I have a problem, negative 3 times negative 4 times negative 2. Be cautious with this. They are all negative numbers, but that does not mean that when I multiply them, I'm going to get a positive, because I have three numbers here. Negative 3 times negative 4, I have two numbers that I'm multiplying together. The signs are the same, they're both negative, so I know I'm going to get a positive, so it needs to be a positive 12. So now I have 12 times a negative 2. The signs are different. For the 12, it's a positive. For the 2, it's a negative. So I know I have to end up with a negative answer. 12 times 2 gives me a 24, so this answer is a negative 24. Remember, the rule that when the signs are the same, you get a positive, and when the signs are different, you get a negative, only works if you have two numbers that you are multiplying. It actually works if you have an even number of numbers you are multiplying together, but we can just work with two numbers at a time, and that's what you're doing. Multiply the first two numbers, see what you get, then multiply the third number. So let's look at one with fractions. It works exactly the same way. And the very first thing I do is I always just figure out, well, is my final answer going to be a positive or is it going to be a negative? Here I have two numbers that I'm multiplying together, and they are both the same types of numbers. In other words, they're both negatives. So I'm not even going to worry. I know that my final answer has to be a positive. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to multiply those numbers together as if those signs weren't even there. Remember, I could multiply straight across, but I can also do some factoring. I can factor a 3 out of the 3 in the 21. 3 divided by 3 gives me 1. 21 divided by 3 gives me 7. And as far as the 10 and the 4, I can factor out a 2. 4 divided by 2 gives me 2. 10 divided by 2 gives me 5. So now I'm going to multiply straight across. 1 times 5 gives me 5. 2 times 7 gives me 14. And once again, I knew that the answer was a positive, so my final answer is just 5/14. It works exactly the same way if I have decimals that I'm multiplying. If I had 3.25 times a negative 4, the signs are different. One's a positive, one's a negative. Because of that, I know my final answer has to be a negative. So I am going to just figure out, well, what's my answer to 3.25 times 4? As I go through and do that, 5 times 4 gives me 20. Put down the 0, carry the 2. 4 times 2 gives me 8, plus 2 gives me 10. Put down the 0, carry the 1. 4 times 3 gives me 12, plus 1 gives me 13. I have to decide where the decimal point goes. Remember, there are two numbers after the decimal point in the problem, so I need two numbers after the decimal point in the answer, which means it would be 13. And now I'm just saying, is it a positive or a negative? Well, this has to be a negative, because this is a positive number, this is a negative number. The signs are different, so I'm going to get a negative. So the final answer to this is just a negative 13. Most people find that multiplying real numbers is much easier than adding or subtracting. Just remember the rules when multiplying two numbers together. First, if the signs are the same, the answer is positive. Second, if the signs are different, the answer is negative. Please let me know if there is anything I can do as you work through this section. Thank you.